Jae-ho Kim stared up at the massive building that would be his home for the next 3 years. The Galactic Academy towered over him, its shining metal walls reaching up into the purple sky of planet Nexus. He took a deep breath of the slightly sweet air and picked up his bags. "You can do this," he whispered to himself. First human in the xenobiology program. No pressure. As Jae-ho walked through the main doors, he felt the eyes of dozens of alien students on him. Some had 4 arms, others had scales, and a few even floated above the ground. He had studied about many alien species, but seeing them all in one place made his heart beat faster. A tall, blue-skinned woman approached him. She had no hair, just smooth skin with small ridges on her head. Her eyes were completely black. "You must be the human student," she said. Her voice was musical, like water flowing over stones. "I am Director Lena. Welcome to Galactic Academy." Jae-ho bowed slightly. "Thank you for accepting me into your program." Director Lena handed him a small metal device. "This will show you to your room and help you find your way around campus. Your research group will meet tomorrow morning." Jae-ho followed the blinking light on the device through long hallways until he reached his room. It was simple but comfortable, with a bed, desk, and bathroom. Through his window, he could see the twin moons of Nexus rising in the sky. The next morning, Jae-ho arrived early at the research lab. The room was filled with strange equipment he had never seen before. As he looked around, the door opened, and 3 aliens walked in. The first was tall, with red scales and 4 muscular arms. The second was blue-skinned like Director Lena, but smaller, with a slight glow coming from her skin. The third was tiny, about half Jae-ho's height, with a hard shell like an insect and large compound eyes. "I am Tak," said the 4-armed reptilian. His voice was deep and rough. "From planet Foros." "I am Mina," said the glowing blue alien. Her voice was soft, and Jae-ho felt a strange tickle in his mind. "From the ocean world of Aquara. I am telepathic, but I will not read your thoughts without permission." "Sung," chirped the small insectoid, clicking its mandibles. "From Hexapod Prime, mathematics specialist." Jae-ho smiled and bowed to each of them. "I'm Jae-ho Kim, from Earth. It's an honor to work with you all." Tak looked Jae-ho up and down with yellow eyes. "We have studied human biology. Your species is surprisingly fragile." Jae-ho felt his face grow hot. "We have our strengths. Your bones break easily. Your skin tears. You have no natural armor or weapons," Tak continued. "How did your species ever become spacefaring?" Before Jae-ho could answer, another person entered the lab. She was human, but older, with gray streaks in her black hair. She wore the silver uniform of a professor. "That's enough, Tak," she said firmly. "I'm Professor Yoon. I'll be supervising your research group this year." The aliens straightened up respectfully. Even Tak seemed to take the professor seriously. After explaining their first project, Professor Yoon asked Jae-ho to stay behind when the others left. "Don't let Tak bother you," she said. "Many species underestimate humans at first." "Why did they accept me if they think I'm too weak?" Jae-ho asked. Professor Yoon smiled. "Because intelligence, adaptability, and resilience are just as important as physical strength. The Academy wants diversity of thought, not just diversity of biology." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "It will take time for them to understand what humans can do. Be patient." As Jae-ho walked back to his room that night, he passed through the central garden. Under the light of the twin moons, he saw many different species talking, studying, and living together. Some had evolved underwater, others in high gravity or poisonous atmospheres. Each had their own strengths. "I'll show them what humans can do," Jae-ho promised himself. "Not by being the strongest or fastest, but by never giving up." In his room, Jae-ho unpacked the last of his things and placed a small photo of his family on his desk. They were smiling in front of the Han River in Seoul, proud of their son who would be the first human at the famous Galactic Academy. Jae-ho's data pad beeped with a message. It was his schedule for tomorrow. Physical assessment at 800 hours. Perfect, he said, smiling. Time to show them what humans are made of. Jai-Ho woke up early the next morning. His stomach felt tight with worry. Today was the physical assessment, and he knew the alien students would be watching closely. He put on the gray fitness uniform the academy had given him. It was made of a strange material that felt cool against his skin. It would measure his heart rate, body temperature, and muscle activity during the tests. In the dining hall, Jai-Ho sat alone with his breakfast until he heard a friendly voice. "Mind if I join you?" It was Hae-Nul, another human student. She was older than Jai-Ho and had been at the academy for 2 years already. "Please," Jai-Ho said, grateful for the company. Hae-Nul sat down with her tray. "First assessment today, right? Don't worry too much about it." "But everyone thinks humans are weak," Jai-Ho said. "I don't want to prove them right." Hae-Nul smiled. "The tests are designed for all species. They don't show what humans do best." The assessment center was a large open room with different testing stations. Jai-Ho's research group was there, along with students from other groups. Tak waved his 4 arms at Jai-Ho. "Human, come watch me set a new strength record." Jai-Ho walked over just as Tak stepped up to a weightlifting machine. The reptilian alien grabbed the bar with all 4 hands and lifted. The screen showed the weight, 1,200 kilograms. 5 times Tak's own body weight. "Impressive," Jai-Ho said honestly. Next, it was Mina's turn for her specialty test. She entered a clear tank filled with water. As the timer started, she simply floated, her blue skin glowing gently. She stayed underwater for 55 minutes without taking a breath. Sung, the small insectoid, stood in front of a complex math problem projected on a wall. His compound eyes moved rapidly as he calculated. He solved in seconds what would take a computer minutes. Then it was Jai-Ho's turn. A testing officer named Kwon led him through the stations. Jai-Ho lifted weights, ran on a treadmill, tested his eyesight, hearing, and reaction time. He did his best, but with each test, he heard whispers from the watching aliens. "So weak. How did they ever survive? Only 70 kilograms. My child can lift more." Jai-Ho's face burned with shame as his results appeared on the main screen. By galactic standards, humans were indeed below average in almost every measure. Kwon, the testing officer, noticed Jai-Ho's disappointment. "Don't look so sad," Kwon said quietly. "These tests were designed by species with specialized abilities. They don't measure what makes humans special." "What's that?" Jai-Ho asked. "Adaptability, endurance, healing speed, problem-solving under stress." Kwon smiled. "Things that are hard to measure in a lab." As they walked away from the testing area, Tak approached Jai-Ho. The big alien looked almost concerned. "Human, Jai-Ho, I did not mean to make you feel bad. Your species has other qualities. Your music is quite good, and your food is interesting." Jai-Ho wasn't sure if this was meant to be a compliment, but he nodded. "Thanks, Tak. Our first research project is in 3 months," Tak continued. "Maybe you can help with the thinking parts." After Tak left, Hae-Nul found Jai-Ho sitting alone in the garden. "Bad day?" she asked. "I knew I wouldn't match their physical abilities, but seeing the actual numbers was hard," Jai-Ho admitted. Hae-Nul sat beside him. "When I first came here, I felt the same way. Then we went on our first field expedition." "What happened?" "Our ship crashed on an ice planet. We had to walk 50 kilometers in a snowstorm to reach the emergency shelter. I was the only one who could keep going after 20 hours. She grinned. "They don't have a test for human stubbornness." Jai-Ho laughed for the first time that day. "So I just have to wait for something to go wrong." "Something always goes wrong in field research," Hae-Nul said. "That's when humans shine." That night, Jai-Ho received a message on his datapad. Professor Yoon had scheduled their research expedition to planet KX-419. They would leave in 3 months. Jai-ho looked up KX-419 in the Academy database. It was a planet with higher gravity than Earth, unpredictable weather, and dense forests. The perfect place to test what humans did best, adapting to difficult situations. 3 months, Jai-ho said to himself. I'll be ready. 3 months passed quickly. Jai-ho spent his time studying and training for the expedition. He ran every morning, lifted weights, and learned everything he could about planet KX-419. The day finally came. Jai-ho and his research group met at the Academy's launch pad. They each carried heavy backpacks full of scientific equipment. Remember, Professor Yoon told them, you're there to collect biological samples and study the local wildlife. Stay safe and work together. The ship that took them to KX-419 was small but fast. In just 2 days, they landed on the planet's surface. As soon as Jai-ho stepped outside, he felt the higher gravity pulling at his body. It was like carrying an extra 20 kilograms. Is the gravity bothering you, human? Tak asked. The 4-armed alien was standing tall, but Jai-ho noticed he was breathing harder than usual. I'll get used to it, Jai-ho replied. How about you? Tak's scales changed color slightly. It is uncomfortable. My planet has much lower gravity. They set up their base camp in a small clearing surrounded by tall, orange-leafed trees. The sky was a deep green color, and 2 small suns shone down on them. The weather prediction system says we have good conditions for the next few days. Some chirped, checking the small device. We should start collecting samples right away. Their first task was to hike 5 kilometers to a river where rare plant species grew. They all carried sample containers, testing equipment, and food supplies. At first, everyone moved well. But after just 1 hour of hiking through the dense forest and the heavy gravity, things changed. Tak, who had been so strong in the Academy's gym, was now struggling. His 4 arms hung low, and his breathing was rough. Need rest, he gasped, sitting heavily on a fallen tree. Minna was having trouble too. Her blue skin had lost its glow. The gravity affects my telepathic abilities, she explained. Everything feels foggy. Sung moved the slowest of all. His small insect-like body wasn't made for long walks, especially in high gravity. Jai-ho had to wait for him often. To everyone's surprise, Jai-ho was handling the conditions better than expected. The gravity was tough, but humans were built to carry loads and walk long distances. Millions of years of evolution as hunters had prepared Jai-ho's body for this. We'll take a break here, Jai-ho said when they reached a small stream. Drink some water and rest for 10 minutes. Tak looked at Jai-ho with new interest. You are not as tired as we are. Why? Jai-ho shrugged. Humans evolved on a planet with changing conditions. We're not the best at anything, but we can handle many different situations. They reached the river by midday and began collecting samples. The river was full of strange plants with blue and purple leaves. Some moved on their own, reaching toward the scientists. Be careful, Sung warned. My scanner shows some of these plants may be carnivorous. As they worked, the temperature began to rise. Soon it was uncomfortably hot, at least 40 degrees Celsius. Jai-ho was sweating heavily, but he kept working. Minna, however, was not doing well in the heat. Her species evolved in cool ocean waters. I need shade, she said weakly. Her blue skin had turned almost gray. Jai-ho quickly helped her to a shady spot under a large tree. Rest here. I'll get your samples for you. By late afternoon, they had collected everything they needed and started the hike back to camp. The heat was still intense, and now everyone was tired. That night at camp, as they organized their samples, Tak approached Jai-ho. Today was educational, the alien said. Your physical test results did not show your true capabilities. Jai-ho smiled. Like Nul told me, the tests don't measure everything. For the next 4 days, they fell into a routine. Each day they would hike to a new location, collect samples, and return to camp. Each day, Jaiho's alien companions struggled with different aspects of the planet. The changing temperatures bothered Sung. The long hikes exhausted Tak. The dry air made Mina's skin painful. But Jaiho kept going, helping where he could and taking on extra tasks when the others couldn't continue. On the evening of the 5th day, Sung checked the weather device again. His compound eyes widened with alarm. "Bad news," he said. "A major electrical storm is coming. We need to secure everything immediately." "How much time do we have?" Jaiho asked, looking at the dark clouds gathering in the green sky. Sung's antenna twitched nervously. 1 hour, maybe less. This storm has high electrical activity. Very dangerous. The team rushed to prepare their camp. They needed to secure all their equipment, protect their samples, and reinforce their shelter. The wind was already getting stronger, bending the orange trees around them. "Tak, help me tie down the main tent," Jaiho called. "Mina, get all the samples into the sealed containers. Sung, check the communication system." Everyone moved quickly. Tak used his 4 arms to hammer stakes deep into the ground. Mina carefully packed their precious biological samples into protective boxes. Sung climbed onto the roof of their small shelter to adjust the communication antenna. The wind grew fiercer. The first lightning flashed across the sky, followed by a boom of thunder so loud it shook the ground. "The storm is coming faster than predicted," Sung shouted from the roof. "The weather on this planet is too unpredictable." Jaiho looked up at the sky. The clouds were now dark purple, almost black. More lightning flashed, closer this time. "Sung, come down from there," Jaiho yelled. "It's too dangerous." Just as Sung started to climb down, a massive bolt of lightning struck a tall tree near their camp. With a terrible cracking sound, the tree split and began to fall directly toward their shelter, and toward Mina, who was still packing samples outside. "Mina, look out!" Jaiho sprinted toward her without thinking. Mina looked up, her black eyes wide with fear. The tree was falling fast. Jaiho reached her just in time, pushing her out of the way with all his strength. But Jaiho couldn't move himself quickly enough. The massive tree crashed down, and a large branch hit him hard. Pain exploded through his body as he was thrown to the ground. For a moment, everything went black. When Jaiho opened his eyes, he was lying on his back in the mud. Rain had started to fall in heavy drops. He tried to move and gasped at the sharp pain in his chest and shoulder. Jaiho. Tak was kneeling beside him, all 4 hands checking for injuries. "Don't move. You're badly hurt." Jaiho could feel warm blood running down his leg from a deep cut. His right shoulder was at an odd angle, definitely dislocated, and each breath brought stabbing pain in his ribs. Mina ran over, her blue skin pale with shock. "You saved me," she said, her voice trembling. "But now you're injured." Sung joined them, carrying the first aid kit. "Multiple injuries detected," he said, scanning Jaiho with a small device. "Deep laceration on right leg. 2 broken ribs. Dislocated shoulder." The aliens looked at each other with grim faces. In their worlds, such injuries would mean the end of any activity. A wounded being would be taken for medical treatment immediately and would rest for days or weeks. "We need to call for emergency extraction," Tak said, reaching for the communication device. But when he tried to use it, only static came through. "The storm is blocking the signal," he said. "We can't call for help." Another bolt of lightning struck nearby, and more trees cracked. The wind was now howling around them. "The shelter's western wall is damaged," Sung reported, his voice high with worry. "If we don't reinforce it before the storm hits fully, the whole structure might collapse." Jaiho knew they were in serious trouble. The storm was getting worse by the minute. Their shelter was damaged. They couldn't call for help, and he was injured. But something deep inside him, something uniquely human, refused to give up. "Help me up," he said through clenched teeth. "What?" "No," Minna protested. You must not move with such injuries. Jaiho looked at them all. Listen to me. The shelter is our only protection from this storm. If it fails, none of us will survive until help comes. Using his good arm, Jaiho pushed himself up to a sitting position, ignoring the pain that shot through his body. Sung, bring me the medical kit. I'll need a field bandage for my leg, Jaiho said. His voice was steady despite the pain. Tak, find the toolbox. We need to reinforce that wall now. The alien stared at him in disbelief. How can you even think about working? Tak asked. Your bones are broken. Jaiho took a deep, painful breath. Because we have no choice. Now help me up. We have work to do. As another flash of lightning illuminated their faces, the alien saw something in Jaiho's eyes they had never seen before. An unbreakable human determination to survive against all odds. Tak helped Jaiho to his feet. The human's face was pale, and sweat mixed with the rain on his forehead. But his eyes remained clear and focused. First, we need to fix my shoulder, Jaiho said, leaning against a storage box. Tak, I need your help. What do you want me to do? Tak asked, his yellow eyes wide with concern. I need you to push my shoulder back into place. Jaiho used his good arm to show Tak the correct movement. It will hurt, but it has to be done. Tak looked horrified. I cannot cause you more pain. It will hurt less once it's back in place, Jaiho explained. Trust me. Reluctantly, Tak followed Jaiho's instructions. There was a sickening pop as the shoulder joint went back into its socket. Jaiho let out a sharp cry of pain, then took several deep breaths. Thank you, he said after a moment. Now I can use this arm a little. The storm was growing stronger. The wind howled around their shelter, and rain fell in sheets. Lightning flashed every few seconds. Jaiho had Sung bring him the medical kit. With careful movements, he cleaned and bandaged the deep cut on his leg. Minna, can you help me wrap my ribs? Jaiho asked. We need to stabilize them, so I can move better. As Minna helped wrap a tight bandage around Jaiho's chest, she used her limited telepathic abilities to connect with his mind. What she felt shocked her, waves of pain that would have left any of her people unable to function. Yet beneath it, a steady determination that didn't waver. How are you still conscious? She whispered. The pain I sense in you. Jaiho managed a small smile. Humans have evolved to work through pain when necessary. Our bodies release chemicals that help us keep going in emergencies. Once his injuries were bandaged, Jaiho stood up carefully. He limped to the damaged wall of their shelter, where part of the roof was starting to leak. Tak, bring me those metal support rods, he said. Sung, get the sealant for the roof. For the next hour, they worked to reinforce the shelter. The storm raged around them, with wind so strong it nearly knocked Sung off his feet several times. Jaiho directed their efforts, showing them how to brace the walls and seal the leaks. Despite his injuries, Jaiho kept working. When the pain became too intense, he would pause, take a few deep breaths, and continue. The aliens watched in amazement as this human, who they had once thought fragile, pushed through barriers that would have stopped any of them. Halfway through their repairs, the shelter's power system failed. The lights went out, plunging them into darkness broken only by flashes of lightning. I'll fix it, Jaiho said, limping to the power unit. Blood was seeping through the bandage on his leg, but he ignored it. You need to rest, Sung insisted. Your wound is bleeding again. Jaiho shook his head. We need power for heat and for the communication system. I'll talk you through the repair. Sitting on the floor with his injured leg stretched out, Jaiho guided Tak through the complex process of repairing the power unit. His voice remained steady and clear, even as pain lines deepened on his face. Connect the blue wire to the main circuit. Now reset the system. The lights flickered back on. A cheer went up from the group. As the night wore on, the storm showed no signs of stopping. The team huddled in their reinforced shelter, listening to the wind and thunder outside. The temperature was dropping, and they needed to conserve power. "We should take turns sleeping," Jaiho suggested. "Two stay awake while two rest." "You must rest first," Minna said firmly. "You've done enough." To their surprise, Jaiho nodded. "Wake me in 2 hours. By then, I should be able to think more clearly." As Jaiho closed his eyes, Tak, Minna, and Sung gathered on the other side of the shelter, speaking quietly. "I have never seen anything like this," Tak admitted. "On my world, someone with such injuries would be completely helpless." Minna nodded. "His mind is different from ours. The pain is there, but he simply decides it will not stop him. The probability of such functionality after these injuries is statistically improbable," Sung added, his mandibles clicking. "Yet he continues." "Perhaps," Minna said thoughtfully, "we have been measuring strength incorrectly all along." Outside, the storm continued to rage. But inside the shelter, something had changed. 3 alien students looked at their sleeping human companion with new understanding. What they had once seen as fragility, they now recognized as a different kind of strength, one their own species had never needed to develop. 18 hours passed before the storm finally began to weaken. Throughout the long night and into the next day, the team took turns watching for new damage to their shelter. Jaiho slept in short bursts, waking every few hours to check on everyone and help where needed. By midday, the wind had died down enough for Sung to climb carefully onto the roof and fix the communication antenna. "I have a signal," he called down excitedly. "Weak, but it should be enough." They sent out an emergency call to the Galactic Academy. The response came quickly. "Research Team 4, this is Academy Rescue. We have your location. Sending ships now. Estimated arrival time 2 hours. What is your status?" Jaiho took the communicator. His voice was rough from exhaustion, but steady. "This is Jaiho Kim. Our shelter was damaged, but is holding. We have 1 injured team member, myself. The others are unharmed. Understand. Prepare for medical evacuation. Can you make it to the landing zone?" Jaiho looked at his teammates. "Yes, we'll be ready." When he put down the communicator, Tak shook his head in disbelief. "You described your multiple broken bones as simply injured. Why?" Jaiho shrugged, then winced at the pain in his shoulder. "Because I can still walk, and because we need to gather our research samples before we leave." Despite protests from his teammates, Jaiho helped pack up their valuable samples. He moved slowly, his face tight with pain, but he refused to stop until everything was secured. 2 hours later, they heard the roar of engines. A sleek rescue ship landed in a clearing near their camp. Medical staff rushed out, led by a human doctor named Dr. Jun. When Dr. Jun saw Jaiho still standing and working despite his injuries, he shook his head. "Typical human," he said, but there was respect in his voice. "Let's get you to the medical bay immediately." On the flight back to the academy, the medical team treated Jaiho's wounds properly. They cleaned and sealed the gash in his leg, set his broken ribs, and put his arm in a stabilizing field that would speed healing. "You're lucky," Dr. Jun told him. "These injuries could have been much worse, but you shouldn't have kept working with broken ribs. One wrong move and you could have punctured a lung." Jaiho smiled weakly. "We didn't have many options." To his surprise, Tak spoke up from across the medical bay. "He saved our lives, Doctor. Without his leadership, our shelter would have failed in the storm." Back at the Galactic Academy, news of what happened on planet KX-419 spread quickly. Students and professors from all species were talking about the human who kept working despite injuries that would have incapacitated most others. Jaiho spent 3 days in the medical center. His bed was soon covered with gifts. Tak brought a healing stone from his homeworld. Minna created a small pool of calming telepathic energy that floated beside Jaiho's bed, helping with the pain. Some calculated the exact nutritional mix that would help human bones heal fastest. On the second day, Professor Yoon visited. She sat beside Jai-ho's bed with a proud smile. "You've given the Academy quite a lot to think about," she said. "What do you mean?" Jai-ho asked. "Most species in the galaxy evolved specific adaptations to survive in stable environments," Professor Yoon explained. "They developed specialized abilities, great strength, telepathy, mathematical processing, but lost general adaptability." She looked at Jai-ho's bandaged leg and ribs. "Humans evolved in an environment that was constantly changing. We faced predators, changing climates, natural disasters. We couldn't become specialized because we had to adapt to too many different threats." Jai-ho nodded slowly. "So instead of one great strength, we developed resilience," Professor Yoon finished. "The ability to keep functioning despite injuries or adverse conditions. Most species never needed that ability." On the third day, Jai-ho's research team came to visit together. They looked different somehow, more respectful, more like friends than just colleagues. "We have preserved all our samples," Sung reported. "They are quite valuable." And Minna added, "We've started writing our research report. We want to include a section on what happened during the storm." Tak stepped forward, all four arms behind his back in a formal posture. "The Academy has asked us to give a special presentation about human resilience. They want to better understand how your species functions." Jai-ho felt a warm sense of accomplishment. He had not set out to be an example of human capabilities, but somehow that's exactly what had happened. "I'll be happy to help with the presentation," he said, "as soon as I can walk properly again." "Take your time," Tak said. "We have learned that sometimes healing is its own form of strength." 6 weeks after the storm on planet HFY Jai-ho walked without a limp through the halls of the Galactic Academy. His ribs had healed, his shoulder moved freely again, and only a thin scar on his leg remained as a reminder of his injuries. As he entered the main lecture hall, many students turned to look at him. Some nodded with respect. Others whispered to each other. Jai-ho was no longer just another student. He had become something of a legend at the Academy. Jai-ho's research team had changed too. What began as a group of strangers had become true friends who had faced danger together and survived. "Jai-ho," Tak called, waving all four arms. "We saved you a seat." Jai-ho sat between Tak and Minna. Sung was perched on a special raised chair designed for his smaller size. "Nervous about the presentation?" Minna asked, her blue skin glowing gently. "A little," Jai-ho admitted. "I didn't expect so many people to come." The lecture hall was packed. Students and professors from all departments had gathered to hear their presentation on adaptive resilience in Earth species. Even Director Lena sat in the front row. Professor Yoon stepped onto the stage. "Today's presentation examines a trait that has been largely overlooked in our xenobiology curriculum: the ability to function despite injury or adverse conditions." She gestured to Jai-ho and his team. "These students will share their first-hand experience with this remarkable trait." One by one, Jai-ho's teammates described what had happened during the storm on KX-419. They showed images of the damaged shelter and explained how Jai-ho had continued working despite his serious injuries. When it was Jai-ho's turn to speak, he felt surprisingly calm. "On Earth, we have a saying. It's not about how hard you can hit, but how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward." Jai-ho looked around the hall. "Humans aren't the strongest, fastest, or smartest species, but we are very good at enduring difficult situations." Jai-ho explained how human bodies work under stress, releasing chemicals that mask pain, focusing the mind, and providing bursts of energy when needed most. "This ability evolved because Earth is a dangerous place," he continued. "Our ancestors faced predators, natural disasters, and changing climates. Those who could keep functioning despite injury or hardship survived and passed on their genes." After the formal presentation, The team answered questions from the audience. Many were curious about the limits of human endurance. "Could all humans do what you did?" asked a plant-like being from the back row. Jaiho thought for a moment. Most humans have this ability to some degree. Throughout our history, there are countless stories of people continuing to fight, work, or protect others despite terrible injuries. Is this why humans have spread to so many planets despite your physical limitations? Asked another student. Partly, Jaiho nodded. We adapt to new environments because we evolved to handle changing conditions, where many species need specific environments to thrive. Humans can adjust to almost anywhere with enough time. After the presentation, Director Lina approached the team. Her black eyes were unreadable, but her voice was warm. The Academy has decided to add a new component to our xenobiology curriculum, she announced. Starting next term, we will offer a course called Adaptive Resilience in Earth Species. Professor Yoon will lead it, with assistance from all of you. Jaiho was stunned. That's a great honor, Director. It is well deserved, she replied. Understanding different forms of strength makes us all stronger. That evening, Jaiho received 2 important messages on his datapad. The first was from Professor Yoon. Applications from human students to the Galactic Academy have increased by 300% since your story spread. You've opened doors for your entire species. The second message was from Hainul. Told you so. Nothing proves human worth like something going terribly wrong. Dinner to celebrate tonight. As Jaiho walked across the academy grounds to meet Hainul, he looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there were thousands of worlds where humans were working, exploring, and adapting. They weren't the strongest beings in the galaxy, but they had their own special strength, the ability to keep going when others would stop. On the dining hall wall, Jaiho noticed a new plaque had been installed. It contained a quote from his presentation. True strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up every time you fall. Beneath it, students from a dozen different species were sitting together, talking and learning from each other, each with their own unique abilities, each with something valuable to contribute to the galaxy. Jaiho smiled. This was just the beginning. ****. The end ****.